Hello again. My story, very normal people. Here we are with our show with famous people. And today we have a writer of 7 books. She prefers to call herself JP. Let's ask her. Welcome first of all.
Thank you very much. Very much happy to be here.
So please, what does it mean JP for you?
Well, the J is for Joanne,
Okay.
and my name has a hyphen in it. And because it is spelt so many different ways, it's just so much simpler to stick to my initials.
Okay. Okay, that is the, let's say, officially we we introduce one another. Now let's go a little bit more deeper. Who is Joanne?
Well, I am primarily and went to university in British Columbia. So I moved to Vancouver.
Sorry, Joanne. So can you say it again because it was frozen everything and we couldn't hear you. Please.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
it's the internet service here. I'm very sorry. So I grew up in Toronto, which is in Ontario in Canada. It's the center province in Canada, so the center of the province or the country. And I moved to Vancouver to go to university, to the University of British Columbia. And people might remember Vancouver from the 2010 Winter Olympics. And it is as beautiful as they say. It is an absolutely gorgeous city, and I love my time there. And you absolutely can ski a mountain in the morning and then go sailing in the afternoon, sitting on
Oh.
a beach. It's absolutely beautiful place to live. And after university, I worked for a number of years in Vancouver. I knew I wasn't going to go back to Toronto right away because I just loved it so much. And then when my husband and I moved to this little island, Denman Island, um, we started to do some traveling, and I took a hiatus from work. So we traveled quite a bit, just visiting cities. We visited Hong Kong and Hawaii and Singapore. We were in Germany and England and Denmark and Spain, Cayman Islands, Indonesia, and Turks and Caicos Islands. Those are the places we visited. But then I decided to travel with my husband, who worked in mining, and we ended up living in a number of different places. So we moved to Calgary for one winter, and Calgary is the site of the 1988 Winter Olympics. It's one of the provinces, it's the province directly beside British Columbia, and it's very cold. It was minus 22 Celsius that winter that we were there. So that was super cold. After that, we went down to the Mexican Baja for a season, spent a winter there. And then we went and lived in a little town called La Colorada, a mining town, and lived there for a whole year. And that was very, very interesting. It was where I learned how little I knew about the world in terms of how things are done differently. There, for example, when you go do your grocery shopping, and I don't know what it's like in Athens where you are, but here you buy a dozen eggs, in the grocery store. They and it you buy by the pound. So when I was buying a dozen eggs, they were looking at me like I was crazy. They would put 12 eggs in a flat and then put another flat on top and string it all up and hand it to me. And then they'd weigh it and charge you by the weight. And the butter, it took me the longest time to find the butter because they sell it in the butcher's section, and they just have a big knife that they chunk off a bit of butter and put it in butcher paper for you. So it was exciting. I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I'm not very good with languages, so I didn't pick up very much uh, Mexican. I picked up very, very Spanish. Sorry, I picked up very little Spanish. So then after that, we went to Tucson. We spent 3 years in Tucson, Arizona, in the States, and didn't make it home until after that. So in 2010 or 2011, we came back, and that's when I started writing, because I had been so immersed in reading while I was gone. I'd been reading urban fantasy and supernatural thrillers, and I just love them. I love the escape of them. And so when I got home and was facing that first really wet, cold winter again, I thought, I'm going to try my hand at this. And I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And 6 books later, here I am.
So now, so what was your motto to start writing the book? What was something that pushed you to do that?
Well, I had two things. I was inspired by the people who I was reading at the time. So
Mhm.
I had been reading Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series. I had read Deborah Harkness's All Souls trilogy.
Mhm.
I'd been reading J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood books and Charlene Harris's True Blood series. So I'd been completely immersed in that and was inspired by it. And when it came to what to write about, I have a recurring dream of flying. It's a very common dream. It's one of the 10 most common dreams. So a lot of other people have it too. And I just imagine what it would feel like to jump off a seaside deck and fly down the coast. And so that's the scene that I started writing. And as I wrote that scene, it occurred to me that no one's just going to jump off a deck without knowing that they can fly. And then you wonder, well, how did she know she could fly? And how did that come to be? Was this something she was born with? Was it something that was given? So I just found that process of trying to explain how this woman came to fly as an interesting way to expand the story. And next thing you know, she has girlfriends, she has mentors, she has a community of people around her, and bad guys coming at her, and people threatening her. And next thing you know, I had a whole story. And I had it evaluated because I wasn't quite sure if it was something that was marketable. So I had it analyzed, or I had a manuscript, and the editor said, yeah, you got something here. Let's work with this and turn it into something even better. So working with the editors, Secret Sky came out.
So, have you, let's say, the first book, it was like just that, let's say, and it is more from your experiences, or is a story, it's like something that came in your mind?
It's primarily something that was in my mind.
Okay.
It's fantasy, urban fantasy, or supernatural thriller territory. But you always draw on things. I am most entertained or most susceptible to believing a story and being absorbed by it when it is close to something I recognize. So I set the characters on the west coast of Canada in the here and now. So a lot of the sites that I mention, the settings I mention, are settings that the readers are familiar with. So that's one of the comments I like the most when a reader calls and says, oh, I was in that store just the other day, or I know exactly the beach you're talking about. So the beach, the ocean, they play a big role in the books, and little bits and pieces of the characters are, people that you come across or you see or you observe when you're having a coffee at Starbucks. So yeah, it's all of both, but certainly the flying part is pretty much made out.
Mm. So, did you have, let's say, an intense time to write, or it was like little by little? How did it work for you?
I I fell in love with writing. I was intense, and during the winter here, where we live, it's very rainy and muddy. It's not conducive to doing a lot of things outdoors. So I was quite content to be inside. I'd go out and get exercise every day, but I could easily write for 8, 12 hours a day.
Wow, that's a good number. That's
And isn't my current uh, plan. I currently spend, maybe 3 or 4 hours writing, and then do other things in the afternoon, like taking care of the business part of being a writer, an indie writer. And I would say that first book probably took me a year and a half or 2 years by the time I got it out. And I indie published because I'm just impatient that way. And then after that, each book probably took about a year. So the time that it took became less as I became more familiar and more comfortable with the process.
Mhm. So, because you have traveled a lot, so did traveling help you on on writing books or your books, or so?
Um, yeah, I would say they did, and I think they did in terms of being prepared for understanding that when you're introducing characters that might not be from Canada, that they would have different ideas and different expectations and look at things differently. Uh, and in my case, in these books, I do travel down the coast with the books. A number of crucial scenes take place in a place called Bodega Bay in California, which is where Alfred Hitchcock filmed The Birds, that little town. And so I actually traveled down to get a sense of what what does the landscape look like? What does the shrubbery look like? Because the third book in the series, the cover is, let me just show you. Um, this landscape is very much what it looks like there. You know, that just,
No,
yeah, very, very flat hills, not a lot of trees once you get up over the ocean. And that actually it was a perfect setting. There's a wine cave that I used as a setting in the sixth book. It was a crucial scene that took place, and I thought, oh, wine cave, that is a perfect location for this secret meeting. So yeah, it's fun. I love being able to incorporate places that I've been into the books whenever I can.
So, what about your life? How did your books, writing they affect your life, as if it did any?
Yeah. Well, remember what I said about it's hard to be anonymous on a small island?
Mhm.
It's even harder to be anonymous and write a book on a small island. So as people got to know that I was writing, I was a little shy at first. You know, it's very what's the right word? You feel very vulnerable when you
Mhm.
share, especially your first book, because it's just such a personal story to tell, even though it's not you.
Mhm.
People think it's
They
you.
think.
So they'll say, oh, so, you
Mm.
did this or that. That it did. It certainly made me better known in the community.
Mhm.
And I've also had to get better at introducing myself and the books, because of course I want people to
Mhm.
read them. And
Right.
so you have to sell them a little bit to people and tell them what the books are about. And I'm a shy introverted person, so doing that has really pushed my comfort
Zone.
level, and made me do things that I wouldn't normally be doing.
Mm. So, if somebody read the book, what would you advise to him or her? How to start?
I wait till you have a whole book in your head.
Mhm.
Start with one scene or one character. Sometimes you have in your mind a character that you think is maybe very interesting, or one little scene, but you don't want to write it because you think it's not a whole book. It's not even a
Mhm.
short story. But what I find happens, and I didn't know this before I started writing, if you start using your imagination and you start writing, like a snowball effect. It will just keep going and going. And the more you use that imagination muscle, the better it becomes. And you will find when you start writing that it just shakes loose other ideas. I know when I'm sometimes you get stuck. You get into you've written a scene and you can't quite figure out how you're going to get from one scene to the
Yeah.
next, or there's a problem, you don't have a big enough motivation or something. If you keep thinking about it, even when you go to bed, if you're thinking about it before you go to sleep, sometimes you wake up with the answer, and it's all because you're constantly thinking about it, and you're putting down on paper the ideas that come to you. So that would be my advice, is just start writing. Don't wait for something big, and write what you love. You're going to be spending an awful lot of time with that if it turns into a book. I mean, a whole year to spend writing is a long, long time. So you better love it.
Mm. So, what about, let's say, your main theme that you have in your books? If you can put them together, what is the message that you want to convey to the reader?
The perseverance,
Mm.
getting back up once you've been knocked down, uh, overcoming your mistakes, knowing you've made mistakes and will mistakes, overcoming them, and being good to your fellow man. Those are the things that are in the book, and you're going to have a hell of a time enjoying yourself while you're getting back up every time. There's some great one of the most fun scenes to write are the flying scenes,
Mhm.
because it's completely in your head. And there are tremendous battles and in air battles, because she has to learn how to fight. And so one of the things that I did was, I thought, again, because I'm very practical, well, how would someone learn to fight in the air? So what I did was thought, if you had a paintball game or laser tag game, you could have your team split up and fight in the air using a three-dimensional space. And I use a big barn as a three-dimensional space. And that's how they learn to fight, is using this space. So imagine flying and having paintballs thrown at you or shot at you while you're learning how to fly and learning how to fight.
So I have a I have one question that I haven't asked the other guests, to say the truth. Eh, what is the philosophy of life according to you? How do you see life? If you
What is the
can,
philosophy again?
the philosophy of life for you. What is the purpose of life? Something like this. If
Purpose of life?
yeah,
Wow, that's interesting. I've never been asked that question
I
before.
know.
I think
I don't ask usually my guests, but I say okay, 7 books, okay, one book for every day. So maybe there is no way you can find something.
I guess my philosophy is always trying to be kind to my neighbors, to my husband, to my family. I think that that's so important, and especially in a time of COVID, reaching out, making sure that people are okay, calling people that you don't call that often, and calling people more often, especially people who are by themselves. My sister-in-law lives by herself, and um, she came over at Christmas time, and we hugged in the hallway, and she said to me, and it really struck me. She said, "I haven't touched someone in months," because she lives by herself. And we're in Canada, we're not allowed to have people into our homes right now. And so that really struck a chord with me. And I thought, oh, I take for granted that I have a husband, and he and I mean, just a hug, and she hadn't had that for a while. And so I think it's really important that people consider
So,
that people are suffering right now. And so, yeah, get in touch, send a card, make a joke,
mhm.
have a conversation.
Yeah, give a call or send a message. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Really
really
important.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how did you take advantage of the time that we were inside in the COVID now? Did you do something special? Did you start to write any piece, or did you think for
I
something
have.
else?
Yeah. Well, well, first off, my creativity has been a little bit stymied by the COVID, for sure. But I had a project that I was in the middle of and finished. So I do have a new book. It's called Bloodmark. It's a completely different book. And it is finished. It's been edited. But for this book, I thought I would try being patient and submitting it to agents to see if I could get it traditionally published. I just thought it would be nice to see what the grass is like on the other side of the fence, because I've been indie published all this time. So so that's in the works, and we'll see. It may not, I may not be able to get anyone interested in it, but I'm going to try. So I'll give it a little while longer before I give up. But yeah, that's a really interesting story too. My elevator pitch for that story isn't as well honed as the elevator pitch for the current story, but let me just see if I can. Okay, here it is. Sorry for the delay.
It's okay.
As I said, it's really new. So it's called Bloodmark. And in it, a young woman who bears a chain of scarlet birthmarks is thrilled when one by one the disfiguring marks begin to disappear, until she learns that the hated marks protect her from a mysterious and homicidal enemy. Now she's in a race against time to find this dangerous enemy before her last mark vanishes.
Very
That's
nice.
the new one.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
by the way, time in your books is an enemy or is something that
Well, it's always nice to find a race against time. You can find a race against time. It really helps move the quicken the pace and move the plot along. So in the new book, that is certainly, I mean, as a matter of fact, I have it by the day. So the chapter headings have the day. So you know that you're in a race against time until that last mark, and you know when it's going to vanish. So it's just a matter of figuring that out. In Secret Sky, it isn't so much, Secret Sky being the first book in the series, it isn't so much a race against time. It is because the woman doesn't know she can fly when it starts out, it's having her figure it out before she kills herself. Let me tell you a little bit about the book, because that'll maybe give you a better sense.
Yeah, please. Yes, please.
What it's about. Okay. So it's a supernatural thriller, which is like it crosses over with urban fantasy a little bit. There's a bit of two. And it is about a woman named Emmeline Taylor who doesn't know she can fly until she falls from the sky. So this is what happens. I mean, she loses gravity and floats up into the air, and then when she realizes she's floating, she crashes to the ground. So quite painful. That fall puts her in the hospital, where a doctor recognizes the second lens, marks her as one of them, because he's one of them too. So the doctor, and this is a group of flyers who call themselves a covey, which is a bird term. And they tell her about the secret world that she is a part of, that she didn't know she was a part of, and they teach her how to fly. But of course, as wondrous as flight is, there is a dark side to this hidden world within ours. And Emmeline Taylor soon learns that the ability to fly marks them as targets for the military and organized crime, who know that they exist and they want to capture them and use their skills to their own advantage. So it's a matter of life and death that the flyers keep their flying activities a secret. They don't want to be abducted. That's why they only fly at night. And it's why they train to fight with their fists and with guns as well. And there are some terrific battles I told you about, both in the air and on the ground, as Emmeline learns how to fly and how to fight. And complicating matters, of course. Emmeline falls for a handsome man, but she's blinded by her love and their steamy sex, and she doesn't see what he's hiding. And more trouble is on the horizon, because Emmeline doesn't than either the military or organized crime.
Okay, that's very nice. Yeah. The rest, let the people buy the book and read the most wonderful thing. Yeah? Let's make it a little bit. You did your part. So, so I have just one more question. If you don't have anything else to add, is that how does it come that the writers are focused more in the fantasy way of writing? They're not writing, let's say, more. It has changed, let's say, the way the writers write.
Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I certainly have always read that genre, so
Hmm.
it's been my favorite. So I've not seen a explosion in that, like more writing in the fantasy area. It's still, I think, a pretty small, relatively small audience for genre writing. I think romance is probably the
Yes.
biggest by far, and nonfiction is still bigger than fiction, according to the bookstores anyway. So
Hmm.
I'm not sure. I haven't noticed the same thing that you've noticed.
At least the author or the writers that I've had in my show, most of them they have had fantasy and this kind of interesting and
Oh, okay.
intrigues and the others. But anyway, it's like
That's good. I like that. Gives me more to read.
okay, okay. Uh, if you have nothing else to say, so we
I'd
can.
like to tell people where they can reach me.
Oh yes, yes, say it, please.
Reach me at jpmcleanauthor.com. And I have a contact form there if you want to get in touch with me. And I also have a bookstore tab with links to all of the retailers that sell the books. And they're available at all the normal retailers like Amazon and Kobo and
Mhm.
Barnes and Noble, and available both in ebook and in paperback.
Hmm. That's good. That's good to know. Thank you very much for being with us in our show and sharing your story and your books. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you, and we 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 wish you the all best and promotion of the other book. So let make it bestseller. Why not?
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Arthur. It's been wonderful being here.
Thank you very much. That's it.